So for my book abstract, I read the book Power Plays, Politics, Football, and Other Blood Sports by John M. Barry. And it was super interesting. So it basically just discussed the theme of power in politics and how that relates to um, athletes in various sports, especially in football. The book gives several stories about um, the book gives several stories about different players and athletes, different things and attributes that made them powerful, and then also what ruined them. And then it turns and it'll also do the same thing with political players, specifically with Jim Wright and how Newt Gingrich brought him down. And so that just kind of, they use football as like um, I guess like a comparison. It kind of like foils it. So the book just sheds light on the nature of political communication and how power can be used for good or it can be twisted to take others down. Power is one of those things that are not inherently bad, but it can be used for bad very quickly, but it can also be used for good. Politicians often use reporters to spread negative news because reporters do have the power of word of mouth. And they use that to gain footing in the political game and therefore gain power. This is similar to athletes who own their power and powerful personalities. Often they'll go much further than skilled athletes who don't own up to the power that they have and the personalities that they have. Not all athletes are, you have to be an amazing athlete with a powerful personality to go forward. If you're just an amazing athlete and you don't have power in the way you carry yourself or the way you think, the way you act, the way you talk, it makes it much harder to go forward in more professional sports. And it's very similar with politics. I think that it reminded me a little bit of when, what's his name? The neurosurgeon, I can't remember his name right now, but the neurosurgeon that was running for the Republican Party for a minute during the 2016 elections, he was genius. And I think that a lot of the issue was, one, he wasn't used to politics and wasn't used to that, how that looked, but I think he could have learned it really fast, but he didn't own the power that he had on stage. And I think that he could have used his personality and really used it to own the stage. So moving on, Barry ends up describing the fall of Jim Wright, who was Speaker of the House. He also will describe the falls of other athletes, early retirement, injuring themselves, not making the NFL like they planned, or losing in the Olympics. You can feel the heavy weight of pain and betrayal in all these stories, but there's always an overwhelming sense of relief in those stories too, even in Jim Wright's case. So he uses the example, heavyweight champion Mark Cameron explains his feeling after losing the Olympics. And he actually said, after losing, he said, "I went out to dinner that night with a friend. He told me I looked 12 years younger that afternoon after losing." So basically his career was over for him at that point. And I think as much as it will break someone's heart to train that much and go that far, like suddenly that weight is also lifted off your shoulders. You don't have to do it anymore. So I think power is like just a very weighty thing. So I think that was, there's a similar thing happened to Jim Wright. So he ended up being actually forced to resign from office. It was interesting because Gingrich and his people did not have enough information on him to probably kick him out on their own, but they essentially ended up forcing him to remove himself from office. And it was actually really, I think, heartbreaking to read because there were hundreds of things that were made up that Gingrich had used his power to tell journalists what to publish. And as journalists kept publishing more and more negative things on Wright, Gingrich took power from that and was able to say, well, the journalists say this, this, and this, and they're all things that he said to the journalists, and none of them were necessarily proven except for like a couple, and even those ones were ones that many politicians have done before. It's like a loophole, not something that they would necessarily get in trouble for, but it got right in trouble. And so he was forced from office. But what was interesting was this quote from the book. During his resignation, he actually looked up and smiles, and then he goes on to state, have I made mistakes? Oh boy, how many? Are there things I would do differently if I had to do it over again? Oh boy, how many, whoa. Oh boy, many may I name for you. So he basically just, he smiled. I just thought it was funny that he smiled, and he goes on to just own the mistakes he made, which I think took back some of that power. But I think he ended up being a little bit relieved. He said his reason to resign was a total payment for the anger and hostility we feel towards each other. He kept saying that when he went into office, he did not want to tear the party up, but he did not want to tear the Senate apart, but he ended up kind of doing that with some of his policies, and so they took him down. By the end of the book, you start to begin to wonder if power really lies in not having power at all, or in the relief of having the weight of power being lifted. So, I mean, it was kind of interesting to read, because in the beginning, you're definitely, in the beginning of the book, you are definitely like, okay, this is really interesting. Like, this is how people gain power. It's all in personality, the way you carry yourself, what you reveal, what you choose not to reveal. But by the end of the book, you start thinking, like, is power really power, or is it more powerful to not own that power and to just be okay with where you are in life? Because I think people who crave power end up never being satisfied, because you can never have all the power in the world.